All right, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order the meeting. May 13th, 2019, coming to order at 7:03 p.m. And I'd also like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. There's a couple changes to the agenda that I just please like to be noted. So if we could please, I'll say the changes and then as amended, if you don't mind. In front of you, you should have a letter from the Colwood Church, and that should be added as part of the agenda for 8.3 and 8.4. You also have a correspondence regarding the Foodland Trust, which should be added to 8.5. And then also I am looking to remove, I believe it's 8.7, which is the West Shore Park and Rec budget. So with those changes, may I get a motion? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, second by Councillor Logan.
As amended.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I am looking for approval of the agenda of the regular council meeting of... Oh, no, I'm sorry. My apologies. I was thinking I missed public participation. I'd like to... we are on now 3, public participation. I'd like to invite anyone present to take this opportunity to address council, to present concerns or questions of council. Comments pertaining to a matter that has been the subject of a public hearing are prohibited where the bylaw related to the matter has not been presented to council for consideration of adoption. There is a maximum of 20 minutes allocated for public participation. Yes. I did that. Yeah. No, I did it right after the time. Thank you, though. No, I appreciate you staying on top of that. Is there any public participation? Seeing none, I'm going to move straight into Mayor's message. I have a bigger Mayor's message tonight, so I will ask Council just to bear with me for a moment. It is with great sadness that I acknowledge the recent passing of 2 extraordinary Colwood residents. On April 29th, the city lost Joe Richardson. Joe volunteered at city committees, specifically between 2011 and 2017. Joe was a member of the Colwood's Park, Recreation, and Cultural Committee. He was also a member of the Colwood Association for Smart Growth and the Esquimalt Lagoon Stewardship Initiative. Joe always had a huge smile on his face and was a sincere, kind, caring individual who was loved by his community. He will be sincerely missed. Also, on May 5th, the city lost Dick Emery. It is also with great sadness that the city of Colwood recognizes the passing of Dick Emery, a longtime community member who has made significant contributions to Colwood. As a past fire chief, CRD director, volunteer, business owner, and community supporter, Dick was inducted as a lifetime member of the Colwood Fire Department in 1988. Presented with the West Shore Chamber of Commerce Volunteer of the Year Award in 1998, and was recognized by the City of Colwood with a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2015. A celebration of life will be held in June for Dick. I just wanted to share a couple comments about Dick. Richard Martin Emery was born to Ernest and Hilary Emery on March 28, 1930. He attended Colwood Elementary School as a child and lived most of his life in Colwood. Dick's volunteer service began as a boy when he helped his mother and other members of the Women's Institute pack parcels for the soldiers overseas. It was during these wartime efforts that Dick first became involved with the fire department. With many of the men overseas, Dick and his brother Alan drove the fire truck without a driver's license to fight a large fire near the West Shore Town Centre. The Emery family has a long history with the Colwood Fire Department. Dick's father, Ernest Emery, was one of the facilitators who assisted in the original establishment of the Colwood Fire District. Between 1946 and 1978, Dick served as one of the original members of the Colwood Volunteer Fire Department while he worked for his father's electrical firm. Dick worked his way through the ranks and served as Colwood's fire chief for 13 years, from 1952 until 1964. Now, as an honorary life member of the Colwood Volunteer Fire Department, Dick was instrumental in establishing the Colwood Fire Hall Museum, which opened in 1994. Several years ago, Dick assisted with the restoration of the fire truck that he drove as the fire chief, and he noticed a smudge on a red dye on the dashboard of the truck. He knew the story behind it well. Years ago, Dick and his brother were fighting a fire by Belmont School, assisted by water bomber planes. However, the pilot plane that usually warns that the water bombers are coming did not get the warning out in time. Dick and the other firefighters were doused in red dye. Some of that dye is still visible around the dash of the fire truck today. After leaving the fire service, Dick served as a CRD director until 1973 and was active in the establishment of the Wanda Fuca Recreational Complex on the fields purchased from the Department of National Defense. In 1993, Dick and the other community members approached the city to restore St. John the Baptist Heritage Church. A management committee was formed, and through their fundraising and hard work, they restored the entire building to create a hall to be complement the church. The hall is named Emery Family Hall, in recognition of the many contributions of Dick and the Emery family. Emery Hall now serves as a meeting place for Sunday school, community associations such as Girl Guides, and public rental spaces for functions. Dick Emery and his family have contributed their time, resources, hard work, and expertise to Colwood for many years. He will be greatly missed. In addition, I also have a couple, three correspondence that I just would like to share. We have, first of all, from the Open Gate Church. Just on behalf of the Open Gates Church, the volunteers and supporters of the neighborhood fresh food market, and the people who benefit from this market, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for the $1,600 grant that the City of Colwood has provided to support this market. Each week, between 75 and 100 people visit the market as a means to help them meet their needs for fresh produce and other perishable food items. Many of the visitors of the market are deeply touched by the gracious way in which they are accepted and encouraged to choose for themselves from the available items. Your grant will assist us in continuing to meet the storage and transportation costs associated with the week-to-week operations of the market. Thank you again for your support. And that was from the Reverend Andrew Hewitt. In addition, I also received a thank you letter, which I won't read the entire letter, but it's I also received a letter from the Vancouver Island South Film and Media Commission thanking for the council's support to continue on with local film industry. And then finally, I wrote a letter today on behalf of council, just congratulating Mayor Young and their council, and I'll just read it to you really quickly. On behalf of Colwood Council, please accept my congratulations on the success of the HSBC Women's World Rugby Sevens Series tournament held at West Hills Stadium on May 11th and 12th. The event provided a high level of entertainment and excitement, attracting local, national, and international interest. It was exciting to watch the Canadian women's team battle for their spot for the Tokyo Olympics. Thank you for igniting community pride and showcasing the West Shore onto the world stage in a way that we can all be proud of. So those were some of our correspondence. And then the last thing I have to say is I am going to encourage everyone in the public to go to colwood.ca/beachfood to see the schedule of beach food vendors who will be arriving Fridays and Saturdays throughout the entire summer. And as well, you can also go there to discover which bands will be playing on Friday evenings. So those resources are there. I will look to council. Is there anything that council would like to share just from an event standpoint or anything? Does anybody? Oh, Councillor Kobayashi and then Councillor Day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for my speech. I just lost a 3-inch of my bridge here, so I'm trying to learn how to talk with half the side of my face missing here. I happened to attend the Western Communities Healthcare program, and I just thought I'd bring it up with council right now. What they're trying to do is trying to get more primary care out here in the West Shore. And of course, they started, Langford started with St. Anthony's, and they want us to be part of it, but the group that's actually organizing it see us having our own So they're looking for, a nomination, preferably a citizen. They had recommended someone, but I think that's up to the council and staff to figure out who should be our representative. So that's something that's just upcoming. I don't have all the details. They're supposed to send me the whole presentation package. They assumed that I knew something about this, and I certainly didn't. I wasn't really that well prepared for it, to tell you the truth. But it's another thing that's just upcoming right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. There'll be a little bit about it in my presentation later on today, but I will be attending the Guns and Gangs Training Conference, 2-day conference in Esquimalt this week. Just to let you know, that initiative and training is available to all resources and municipalities throughout the CRD, and it is initiated through Pacific Centre Family Services Association's Mia Golden, who works very closely with the Mobile Youth Services team to help to provide services that address youth and runaways and exploitation. So gangs have been kind of a big focus over the last few years, as there is an ever-present threat of gangs moving into this area from the mainland.
Thank you. Seeing nobody else, I'm going to move on to 5, which is the adoption of the regular council meeting minutes of April 23rd. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, second by Councillor Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Day.
Thank you. On page, I just can't see where the page number is, but 14 of 231 on the whole package. It's regarding the scheduling of the censure and sanction hearing. And it says that the Director of Corporate Services advised that staff is not aware of any outstanding items and suggested that I meet with staff to advise what information is missing. And I wish to advise Council that I have provided written request for those records, and many of the records that I have asked for have still not been provided. So I'm just giving you the information that there are many questions that I asked in that email that have not been addressed. And I will continue to work to try to secure those.
Thank you. Seeing no other, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I believe that takes us to 6.1, which is the Chair, Cynthia Day, of the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee 2018 Annual Report.
Thank you. I will see if I can get us started. There it is. Hooray. Technology works. The Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee is mandated under provincial and federal law. Under the Provincial Family Court Act, under Section 4.1, we are designated by the Attorney General since 1984 to be the Youth Justice Committee, and also through the Ministry of Children and Families to be the committee that reviews the circumstances for youth in custody. To that end, we try to, I apologize, our reports are very long because we don't have a specific home. I keep all of our terms of reference, pretty much everything to do with the committee you can find in our annual report. We publish our annual report in January every year when we have our AGM. And we work through a number of subcommittees. Our job is to be aware of the circumstances for youth and families who may come into contact with the justice system. And we represent the community for government, both local, provincial, and federal. So we speak to the community side of things, because obviously when a family is interacting with the justice system, it's unlikely to be a time when they can really advocate for change. So we try to take that, all the information that we can glean, and provide feedback to all levels of government as to the appropriateness and functionality of the system that exists. There are a number of subcommittees, including the Capital Region Action Team for Sexually Exploited Youth, Court Watch, Youth Matters, Family Matters, Youth Mental Health, Communications, and Restorative Justice. Priorities is initiatives that may be undertaken with nonprofits or other agencies to advance a new idea, to test if it could work. And then we report back to all levels of government each year on what works and what's needed. Youth mental health, we've been advocating for since 2006. Those of you who've been around that long will remember many resolutions at UBCM. We were a major force behind the Belmont Youth Clinic opening up and being sustained and moving to the new building, and it's now a model for the region. We also, through the Capital Region Action Team for Sexually Exploited Youth, we bring over Children of the Street Society from Vancouver, who are a nonprofit created by people who've had their children go missing and who've been exploited on the streets. Housing for at-risk youth is a really big issue, and particularly true in the West Shore. Bill McElroy is the chair of the Capital Region Action Team, and he has been in local newspaper many times advocating for youth housing along the lines of the Threshold Youth Housing Society, who do provide some support services to youth as they're on their way to becoming independent. We were recognized last year by the federal MPs who were fighting to end exploitation, and we supported motion M47. I brought a lot more information about that back to council, and they are working diligently to try to end modern slavery and human trafficking. Through our Court Watch Committee, which is chaired by a retired Crown Counsel, Georgia Peters, she advocates for Indigenous reconciliation and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Children. We do a lot of projects to try to help children to be more informed as to what their rights are, so that they can understand if and when their rights are being infringed upon. We supported the creation of the Peninsula Youth Clinic in collaboration with the Physicians of BC Local Action Team, proving that a youth clinic was achievable and making the case. They needed about 1 month of funding to show that it made a difference for youth. We provided that funding, and as a result of them having the statistics, they were able to make the case, and the province stepped up to address the physicians' funding, which was, it was kind of one of those chicken and the egg situations. And we are currently organizing ongoing Indigenous reconciliation training for all members of the Family Court and Youth Justice Committee. Last year we held the youth showcase called Reimagining Masculinities at the University of Victoria. 100 youth were sponsored to attend. They had presentations from the Moose Hide and the White Ribbon campaign, and there were spoken word performances about lived experience of youth, and particularly they worked on talking about consent, because consent has been a really big issue for charges for youth, and around what constitutes consent and creating that awareness in youth to address that rape culture, which is so systemic, especially at the universities. It was live streamed to include local high schools, so they didn't have to transport themselves to UVic in order to participate. And planning is underway for a second event this year along the same lines. And we also work with Restorative Justice Victoria, who, despite the name, they do actually provide about 5% of their caseload is related to West Shore cases. They are particularly involved in very complex cases that require specific knowledge. So they provide a training resource throughout the region. They coordinate. They have about 100 volunteers. And their biggest problem seems to be having ongoing core funding. They get a lot of funding for specific projects through proceeds of crime or other grants. And one of the interesting projects that was really successful that they did last year was around distracted driving. So when people were ticketed for distracted driving, they were given an opportunity to, instead of taking the $200, I think it's $278 fine, they were able to take a one-day training session with RJ Victoria and understand some of the impacts that distracted driving has. And 100% of the victims and 100% of their offenders said that their state of mind after being involved with RJ Victoria was better. And all of the people who participated in the distracted driving course reported that they were more likely to take their learning to heart and change their practice rather than simply paying a fine and hoping not to get caught next time. This is the poster for the gang and gun violence prevention training that I mentioned I'll be attending tomorrow and the next day. And it is going to be talking about the current trends, how to identify the negative peer groups in our school communities, how to create an inventory of supports and services, because many West Shore youth were part of the, what's the word for that, the impetus to create this program. Because youth who were attending the Belmont Youth Clinic were not being treated for injuries that were lasting for days, and some of those injuries were related to pressures to join gangs. I'm aware of 7 gangs that have tried to operate in the Victoria area, many of them in the West Shore. So it is an ongoing concern for our area and one that we need to get a handle on. We are always available at the committee. You can always reach us by email. It's vfamcourt@gmail.com. And we have a brand new website that we are just in the process of designing. Our last website was about 13 or so years old, and it had really lost its functionality. So we are hoping that our new website will allow us to interact better, reach out to youth who are often more available online than they are in real life, and also be able to provide supporting documentations in an easy-to-find place where I don't have to give you the report that's 100 pages long every year. So hopefully this will make things easier in the future.
Thank you. I will go to council. Does council have any questions for Councillor Day? Councillor Kobayashi.
Just a comment and a question. It's obvious that you're very passionate about this, just reading your report. But I guess what I looked at too was your funding model, and not sustainable, does not equal. So I was just wondering what you're gonna do to adjust it, because I noticed that it surprised me that who wasn't funding you. So it was very surprising. So that's my question is, how is this sustainable?
So currently our funding is through the Capital Regional District. When the acts were brought in by the province and the federal government, there was pretty much zero consultation. Thou shalt have a committee. So every community is mandated to have a family court committee. And in order to meet that mandate, it kind of made sense to come together as a region for the funding. So we are funded through a bylaw, which I can't remember the number, but through the CRD. So everyone pays a per capita amount under the CRD formula. So big municipalities pay more, small municipalities pay less. And our constitution is every municipality, all 13, are to send a representative and or an alternate. I invite them to send citizen representatives and a council representative, because in times when we've had only a citizen representative, sometimes there's a disconnect between the citizen who's doing the work and the council who's appointed them. And the CRD also sends 5 to 7 members to represent the CRD, and the school districts are all invited to send a representative. And then those are the voting members. Each municipality gets 1 vote. And then the resource agencies from each area come and go as they're able to, and they inform us of what they're seeing on the ground, what the issues are. And so we're very involved with youth probation, very involved with the Ministry of Children and Families, and a little less involved with the court system, because they've had an incredible amount of change in the court system in the last probably 10, 12 years. Processes have been changing. We're very lucky in that we now have a family law lawyer who has taken on the Family Matters and his portfolio, and helping us to understand the changes in legislation within the court system. So how separation and divorce arrangements are processed, and how often or how little children get to have their voices heard in that process.
Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor? Councillor Kobayashi?
Sorry, Cynthia, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, but it's just that the financial statement itself, like, the only reason you're solvent right now is that you had money in the bank, but now your expenses are exceeding your revenues. So, that's only sustainable for so long. So I was just wondering, does the CRD top you up, or how does, I'm sure you can't work in a deficit, obviously, but...
No, absolutely. We do not work in a deficit. We have been working within our funding envelope and saving some money. When we started in 2006, we started investigating the Youth Mental Health Initiative. We knew that potentially a big push was needed to make it happen. We were trying to make the case to the province to take that on. So we, instead of spending money, we saved some money. We set aside $10,000 for youth mental health. Our funding annually is $13,000, plus CRAC gets an allotment as well. And right now we are looking to reach a point where we're spending what we get, but not more than what we get. So currently I guess it looks a little skewed because we spent several years not spending the money, and we're extremely frugal. We do provide lunches for the meetings, but we do it in a very affordable way. We just have cold cuts brought in and salads, and we take all our leftovers, and we do a lot of things where we reach out to the community to help support us. So most of our operations, they do take into account what we need to get by for the year, so secretarial support and lunches, and then the extra money that we're able to set aside by operating as frugally as possible, we use to actually put service back into the community.
Anyone else? See none? Thank you, Councillor Drake. Moving on then to 7.1, correspondence regarding council direction. There's a letter from Mayor Fred Haynes from the District of Saanich regarding funding for the Victoria Sexual Assault Center. The District of Saanich is requesting that CRD municipalities write to the province requesting that continuous provincial funding be provided to the Victoria Sexual Assault Center. Council discussion? Who wants to go? Councillor Dick.
I just think this is a very worthwhile investment. We at the Family Court Committee have had a couple of presentations by the Sexual Assault Center, and when they had managed to open their new center and had no furniture, the Victoria Family Court and Youth Justice Committee provided $2,000 so that they could get furnishings for their new center. We are very aware that they have very specialized services that are really helpful in the unfortunate event that it's needed, and we're firmly supportive at the Family Court Committee, and I would certainly support an initiative because this is a service that should exist, and it takes specialized people with specialized training in order to provide it.
Councillor Parkinson? Okay, thank you. Great. Do I need to worry about all these CCs? Should I introduce that? Or should I make that suggestion? Okay. All right. So staff made a recommendation as well. So what you've moved, but also that the following agencies be copied, which would be the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Social Services, Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions, Ministry of Public Safety and Solicitor General, members of the Legislative Assemblies representing constituencies within the CRD, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Director of Police Services, the local police boards and the RCMP, the CRD board, and all CRD municipalities should be CC'd on this letter. This is a suggestion. And whoever moved it, was it you, Cynthia, that moved it? Stuart, are you comfortable with just adding that? Or not? Okay. All right, then any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I think Councillor Parkins is just trying to drag it out because he hadn't had dinner yet, and he just wants to slow this council meeting down as much as possible. All right.
Second.
Well done. All right. Thank you. That'll move us along. So I got a mover. Do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you. Any discussion? Oh, yes. Another councillor who's had dinner.
I am. Yeah, I guess I have a question, Mr. Mayor, because I want to understand this myself, and I don't have very much more time to call myself a rookie anymore here. So what I don't understand in this letter is they quote that we have all declared a climate emergency that each council has, and I kind of cannot remember that happening here at this council.
No, we have not at this council.
So that answers my question, because I just said, when did this happen? Because, I'm going to be very frank and political with my comments here. I don't even understand what that means, this whole thing, this climate emergency. And I don't know if anyone's really thought this out. Is it just a political statement? Like, what is it going to cost us? Because we certainly don't have a line item in our budgets. It's not all about money or everything, but I still don't even, I'm not even understanding what the priorities are here. I'm sort of in total disagreement with what the city of Victoria had done and has withdrawn now. They were going to sue all the oil companies, for example, right? I mean, we didn't sign on for that. Never mind having a council resolution supporting this declaration. So I guess I just want to understand what does this, I know the directors at CRD have every right to do whatever they want to do, but they've made this declaration, but I don't understand what that obligates us to. And so I just was hoping that you can give me a clear definition of what that is.
Well, just before Councillor Baxter, I will, I promise.
Yep.
Just to answer your question, it hasn't obligated us to anything to this point.
That's more or less what I was going to say, that, I've talked to people who've been involved in this declaration of climate emergency, and there is no specific action tied to that. I think that the idea is to try and draw people's attention to the great urgency and the danger to humanity, quite frankly, if we don't step up action. That's all.
So, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I do believe that we have not declared a climate emergency, but the previous council did send a climate accountability letter some time ago. So I just, you know, all of the reports that are out there right now about the need for action on climate change, it really does. I don't think we would be doing our job as leaders if we didn't even address it in some way. So I just think I'm not sure that whether this action is better than that action, but we do, I think, all agree that we need to do something.
So presently, we for 7.2, I just have a motion to receive. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we're on to 8. 8.1, Fire Chief, renewal of the mutual aid agreement. The Fire Department mutual aid agreement with the District of Highlands has expired and needs to be renewed. The mutual aid agreement is for the provision of fire suppression and rescue services. Does council have any questions for our Fire Chief?
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. 8.2. Thanks, Chief. 8.2, Director of Long Range Planning, review of cannabis bylaw regulations. Staff have provided a review of the city's land use regulations pertaining to cannabis. The report includes the existing city regulations pertaining to the sale and production, the options to address the legalized status of non-medical cannabis, and the recommendations to manage the retail sales of non-medical cannabis through the site-specific rezoning application, and new policies to coordinate with provincial retail licensing process. Does council have any questions for staff? Councillor Day.
Thank you. And just a reminder that I believe some of these letters are regarding that are on our table. One of my concerns in looking at this, and I've been following the legislation around retail sale of cannabis for some time, everywhere that it's been examined, there's been some sort of evaluation about where is appropriate. All of those evaluations that I've been aware of have taken into account the location of schools and preschools. And this location is got three, actually, if I think about it now, 3 preschools that are in very close proximity to it. So my question is to staff, at what point in time are we going to take into account the location of other sensitive users in the vicinity?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In preparation of this report, staff did look at the cadastral base, so the properties that make up Colwood. And we also looked at the zoning. And as we touched on briefly in the report, the integration of different land uses within our zoning regime make it very difficult to say to council that a certain specified setback could be achievable in Colwood. The fact is that we've got daycares and schools integrated within most of our commercial zones. So it makes it almost impossible to set up a setback regime that doesn't butt up against some of those potential uses and existing uses.
I find myself in great difficulty here. I have almost no familiarity with cannabis, never having sampled the stuff. And I I have no idea what the danger to preschools is, whether, the mere existence of a store will make 3-year-olds hunger in the future for cannabis, or what the problem is. But I think in this item and the next two, we are offered no real information other than what we can read in the zoning bylaw. And I think that myself, before I could make a decision on any of this, I would need some sort of real information, which presumably is going to have to come from experts or bodies outside the municipality, because I doubt that we have the internal expertise. Although I'll be glad to hear if we do.
Councillor Logan, did you? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Parkinson and Logan.
Okay, so I think what we're dealing with here is what we want to do about cannabis. What are we going to do in Colwood? How are we going to do it? I'm as familiar with it as Councillor Baxter, which is not very. My sense is from some of the stuff I see that these stores, some of them are quite, high-end and well done and secure and, have a whole bunch of rules to follow and probably are normal businesses like liquor stores and everything else. So I'm not starting from a position where I'm opposed to them at all. I think it is something where we should walk carefully before we run. I guess some of the things in here, there's talk of trying to do it under temporary use permits. My concern is that a temporary use permit, if you tell somebody they can do something for 3 years, then whatever costs they have to set up the store and the security and the this and the that's required has got to be amortized over those 3 years, and then so they're going to be perhaps not as secure or as safe or as nice as they would be if they had a longer tenure. So my thoughts are that a temporary use permit is probably not the way I'd like to go. I'm open to discussion and persuasion that perhaps there's another way. Again, I say that there's probably a market. I find myself being a little hypocritical to say you can't sell cannabis for your vice, but don't close my liquor store so I can get my bottle of wine on rare occasions. What?
Why are we all laughing?
So let's deal with this. Let's do something. Let's find a mechanism here that businesses who want to do in this now perfectly legal business want to do and come forward. My thinking is that probably a couple of stores within Colwood would make some sense. Maybe there's another number. So I would say you could look at one sort of in the Colwood Corners area and one perhaps central Colwood, if you want to call the Kelly Road, Mount View, area in there, may be appropriate. I don't think I've seen anything that would preclude us, instead of waiting for applications to come in, to go out with a request for proposals for stores to say, we'd be interested in a couple of stores. Tell us what they look like. Tell us, what kind of security you'd have, where you'd put them. We could fuss about setbacks from daycares and schools and what have you. And like Michael, how appropriate that is. The sites that are up on the agenda later are both next to a bunch of preschools and, a very long-term liquor store that's been in that location since I moved to town. So I don't know if there's any history of that causing problems with the neighborhood daycare. So, but anyway, if we sort of go to the industry and say, we'd be interested in hearing what you have to say, let's look at A1 in Colwood Corners and A1 somewhere else, and then maybe in the future Royal Bay would make some sense, but let's walk before we run. So I'm wondering what the rest of council and staff would think of an approach along those lines.
Thank you. I have Councillor Logan next, and then Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor Jansen, who's remoting in, indicates he wants to speak too.
Okay. You can be after Doug.
Certainly. So I guess I'm along the same lines. I'm not a user of marijuana or cannabis, but I look at cannabis. It's a controlled substance, much like alcohol is. It's sold in a controlled setting, like alcohol is. So I ask myself, why would we consider cannabis any different when we're talking about retailing? And I agree. I'm not sure that's going to have a huge effect. Like, I understand the theory, of course, and the concern around daycares and schools, but I'm not sure, as Councillor Baxter had said, whether it will affect a 3-year-old as an example. And I think a lot of our fear is generated from the stereotypes and the stories that we've created in the past with the illegal acquisition of cannabis. I guess one thing I would caution, I guess, and I know our neighbor has tied some fees to the hiring of an additional RCMP member. There's risk with that. If the business goes belly up or decides to move on, then the municipality's faced with picking up the extra costs of the RCMP member that was hired as a result of some of the fees that were charged to the cannabis store. So I think we need to give some really good, careful thought about that, and whether they are selling a product not unlike a grocery store or a pet food store, and do we treat them differently or do we not? I agree. I don't think that we can deny them, certainly. But however, I don't want to see them on every corner either. And I agree, perhaps we create kind of a liquor zone where they are permitted in certain areas, like Colwood Corner, maybe Kelly, Royal Bay as an example. Then I think that would be positive, and we set a limit, period. But
Thank you. Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think what everyone is saying, at least subpara I of, or A, I should say, of their staff recommendation. And I'm going to support the staff recommendation. In fact, you can teach old dogs new tricks. I guess I was one of those that was staunchly against cannabis, period. I grew up in an environment where it was taboo, right? I mean, it meant your career. And this is the toughest thing, and to accept this now, it's lawfully, it's like back in the Prohibition days, right? Booze was a no-no, and it eventually came back and it became legal. And this has to be treated the same way, I guess, no matter whether I like it or not, and it challenges my own values. The issue is that it is legal. And I got to stop the stereotypes now that you're going to have a bunch of guys standing outside the store smoking joints. That's not going to happen the way it's controlled, right? It is going to be a controlled substance. So, I mean, I looked at the options that staff brought up, and I absolutely agree with their recommendation. So, after Councillor Jensen says this thing, I was going to make the motion that we accept the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jensen?
Thank you. I concur with much of what's been said, and I'm happy to put forward the staff recommendation in the form of a motion. I do believe that we need to tread lightly. We don't want to see a proliferation and a concentration of these outlets like some of our metropolitan cities have. And so I'm happy to put forward this motion.
Great, thank you. And I got Councillor Kobayashi who has seconded it. Any other comments, Councillor Day?
Thank you. So I, like everyone else, we're all struggling to get comfortable with this newly legal situation that we find ourselves in. But I am aware of cases in Nanaimo where the security of the building is a major issue. And I am concerned that the location that's being proposed is an older strip mall that may be less secure than a newer or purpose-built location might be. So I will not be supporting this application.
So just to be clear,
That's not
we're still on 8.2, which is policy.
Okay.
And then 8.3 and 8.4 will be at the mall.
Okay.
There's a thing. So right
My
now we're still on
apologies.
policy. Councillor Baxter and then Councillor Parkinson.
The resolution we're talking about is recommendation A, yes? Right. If recommendation A is carried out, I still feel I certainly will lack the information to make those decisions. And I would ask that either in a separate resolution, which I'm prepared to move, or as part of this, that we be provided with some sort of education on what evidence there is, positively and negatively, of the effect of one of these stores in an area. Whether it's got a school or whatever it's got. I'm assuming there must be information out there by now. Colorado's been selling it for ages, and making a lot of money at it, by the way. So if we could be provided with that information, even if it's just a list of references that we can look up on the web, I don't care. I'm prepared to do the reading, but I don't know where to start. So if the mover of this would accept something added as an addition, or you want to do it separately, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, let's do it separately. Let's keep it clean. So that so Councillor Parkinson? Well, I'll come back to you.
Well, I guess I was on the same page as Councillor Baxter. I mean, under number 5 options, we have A, council may receive this report as presented without directing staff to draft amendments to land use bylaw. This would maintain the status quo and allow site-specific proposals for new non-medical cannabis retail stores to be assessed individually. And I don't think we've talked about but I think it's sort of, we have to do something. I think that I would suggest that we should be talking about option A and B, where we direct staff to prepare draft policy containing guidelines, the citing of new cannabis retail stores and or processing of applications. There's other options in there that I think are counter to that. So I think to have a realistic motion, we should be looking at A and B. And I don't know if that was the intent of the movers or what the intent was.
That is the recommendation.
A and B.
Sorry, am I not far enough down in here? I do so apologize. Well,
It's okay. Any discussion on this motion, and then Councillor Day?
Thank you. My remaining concern is that there is nothing in the recommendation that speaks to the security of the site. So it isn't asking for, and staff can correct me if I've missed something, but there is no part of this recommendation that asks for any sort of an outline as to what the security plan is for the building.
I'll look to staff, because my understanding is one of the requirements is that they have a vault.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the provincial government, through its licensing process and the maintenance of their standards, look at security of the retail site. I think it would be tantamount to the municipality getting involved with the security of other potentially sensitive locations, that such as a bank or a liquor store, in terms of the security issue being dealt with by other means. In this case, as I said, the provincial government is looking at that. I would like to mention also that staff have looked at some of the more tangential issues and the efficacy of policies such as setbacks, and happy to comment on those questions if council would like me to. And lastly, I'd like to mention that there is an omission in the staff report. I mentioned the fact that their 3-year temporary use permits would then require either cessation of the use or a rezoning. They can be renewed once for a total of 6 years. So I'd just like to mention that for council.
Councillor Parkinson?
Yeah, sorry, but I have a bit of a concern here. What I referenced earlier under options, A and B. Well, B says direct staff to prepare draft policy containing guidelines on the siting of new cannabis retail stores and or processing of applications. To me, that would discuss things like we've talked about, how close to a school, how close to a preschool, how close to a liquor store, maybe good, maybe bad, don't know. But under the recommendation, which I understand is what's been moved, it then adds that the draft policy to streamline the processing talks, it says by instituting the following, designating a public hearing held in the course of rezoning application process to fulfill the requirements of public consultation associated with provincial non-medical cannabis retail sales license application. Probably not a bad idea. Delegating to staff the authority to make recommendation and comment on a provincial non-medical cannabis retail sales license applications for operations that have already been approved by council through a site-specific zoning. Again, not a bad idea, but doesn't address what I felt was not only important, but what it should be talking about, a draft policy containing guidelines citing of new cannabis stores and or processing of applications. It does seem to talk about processing of applications. If we accept one, that they're going to go to the province and say, council's talked about it, they're okay with it, don't bother with more public process. I'm okay with that. But it hasn't given us the information on, you know, what should we be looking at as we look at these things? What are the guidelines? What are the setbacks? What are the concerns that we should be looking at? So I kind of think that it's taken a broad policy and it's defined it narrowly, and I'm not as comfortable with the narrowness of that definition as I would be with the broad policy.
Okay. Just before I go to Councillor Baxter, staff, do you have any comments?
Mr. Mayor, the staff recommendation was purposely narrowed to focus on the guidelines for the process, the policy for process. The initial look at the potential for us to implement guidelines on citing, as I said, is complicated by the fact that we have these uses that could potentially seen as sensitive to cannabis retail interspersed amongst our commercial zones. So if there's a policy statement that requires a minimum separation, you're really looking at little or no opportunity to cite cannabis retail in Colwood. The other factor that feeding into that is there's a lack of evidence to suggest that setbacks to uses would necessarily have a public interest effect. The medical health officer advocated setbacks to schools and other areas where children are often to congregate. And that was seen as an attempt to limit the normalization of cannabis use, akin to the public health efforts to limit smoking amongst youth, smoking of tobacco. So in that sense, that's what we understand to be the biggest benefit of separating cannabis retail from places where youth and children visit. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned. I thought the recommendation was just A, or the resolution was just A, and now we've included B2. I'm uncomfortable with delegating to staff when, first of all, I think it's in order to delegate to staff, we have to give them parameters. You can't delegate an authority of council without some kind of limits on it or guidance, and we have no idea what the limits or guidance is at this point. So I would definitely vote against this unless we remove B2. And I think that B2 should come out of the above once we have a further understanding of what we want to do with it and what guidance we would give to staff. Now, for instance, if staff produce this draft policy and we're perfectly happy with it, then the guidance would simply be in accordance with the draft policy and council's resolutions at the after the public hearing, and in regards to the rezoning, then that would be their guidance. But right now, it's a blank check.
Okay. Councillor Kobayashi, then Day.
Okay, I must be reading a different recommendation than you, Councillor Baxter. It clearly says delegating to staff the authority to make recommendation and comment on a provincial non-medical cannabis retail sales license applications for operations that have already been approved by council through a site-specific rezoning. That's what it says. So I don't understand what power we're delegating to them. There's nothing in that premise that says that.
So
They're
it depends whether,
recommendations.
sorry,
Sorry, go ahead.
it depends whether the recommendations and comments have already been approved or whether just the zoning has already been approved. That's a good point, Councillor Kobayashi. There are two ways of reading that. Because if you read the already been approved as simply the rezoning has already been approved, then I have a problem. But if you read it that the recommendations and comments in detail have already been approved, that's different. In which case, why do we even need it? Because if we've made those recommendations and comments, then staff would simply be transmitting them. So that's not a delegation of any authority. I stand to be corrected by staff on that.
I'm going to go to staff, then Day, then Parkinson.
Firstly, what staff recommending here is a draft policy. So if certainly council wants to add to the motion to build out what policy objectives would be included there, staff can certainly oblige. What we're trying to do here is streamline the process. If we're saying there is a site-specific rezoning process that's going to involve municipal resources, time on the behalf of the public, it'd be a one-stop shop for that proponent to come to council, go before the public, and either have their application approved or denied. The province requires a secondary step where council approves a license that would be forthcoming from that initial process. And what we're trying to do is combine them so that that rezoning process forms the provincially mandated public hearing and recommendation from council. And the province allows council to do that by delegating that step to staff. So certainly staff would follow whatever policy council saw fit to guide that process and not go against any decision of council with respect to a specific rezoning.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm really glad that we're having a thorough discussion. I know it's taken a lot of time and some of us didn't have dinner and all of those issues. But what's really clear to me through the discussion is that all of us are new to this, and there's, this almost gold rush atmosphere going on with, everybody wanting to get into cannabis these days because it's a new market. I'm not opposed to cannabis stores, but I am really concerned about whether or not we're well enough informed to be getting this decision right for our community. And for that reason, I'm going to be opposing this motion because I would really prefer to see us do the temporary use permit first, so that means that it would be issued on a case-by-case basis. It would be allowed in a site-specific location for up to 3 years. They could either be required to rezone or stop if it hasn't worked out and the community's not happy with it, or if the community's happy, we rezone, we move forward, everyone's good. To me, the site-specific temporary use permit does give us that opportunity to, try before you buy. That's not a good analogy in this case, but it's just to give us the sense of that our community is going to be comfortable with this. As the planner pointed out, there's almost no locations that we could identify in Colwood that aren't going to be close to something the federal government and the, lost the name, but the doctor who's in charge of provincial health has stated when I was at AVICC that there are major concerns about co-locating liquor and cannabis and from a health perspective. I don't know the answers. I'm just saying there's a lot of questions. I would rather us have the chance to relook at it in 3 years from now and say, we got it right, or no, we need to do this differently.
Okay, before I do Councillor Parkinson and then back to Baxter, allow me to make a couple comments just because Councillor Day has brought it up. For 8.2, really, for myself, the issue was determining if we were going to go with a temporary use permit or if we were going to just begin business licensing. The benefit to temporary use permit has been, as we have witnessed, that the City of Langford has communicated that they are able to generate through their fees a significant dollar amount which allows them to offset some of their RCMP costs. That's the benefit to doing a temporary use permit. The negative to doing a temporary use permit has been, you've heard it already, around it creating an insecurity around employment. The other thing that I have been told by staff is that the government, British Columbia government, is interested in the City of Colwood to promote a government store in our jurisdiction. They will not look at Colwood if we issue temporary use permits. So we will exclude ourselves from the ability to have a government store in our jurisdiction if we choose that we are going to go the temporary use permit road. And that is the struggle that I saw with 8.2 was this council giving clear direction to staff of which way are we going. Are we going to go the temporary use permit or are we going to go with the regular business licensing? I would also like to bring back, just so that everybody's clear, that the recommendation we are considering is that the council receive the staff report titled Review of Cannabis Land Use Regulations dated April 15th, 2019 and consider site-specific rezoning proposals for new cannabis retail stores on a case-by-case basis, and that staff prepare a draft policy intending to streamline the processes of non-medical cannabis retail store applications. So this is the first step to this. This is not the end. So this is about staff bringing back to us a draft policy. And so that's where we're at with this. So Councillor Parkinson, then Baxter.
So a few things. Firstly, I'm for very different reasons than Councillor Day. I'm going to vote against this. I don't like where we're going here. I don't agree with a temporary use permit. What it means to the provincial store is a minor factor. I just worry about it's kind of like the fireworks guy who pop up for a week before Halloween and are gone. They're not investing in making the store right. We've talked a little bit about security and location and vaults and whatnot. There's a big expense to setting up one of these stores, right? I would think, and I would like to give the people an opportunity to do it. What we're voting on here, the recommendation is firstly that we're going to let processes come to us on a case-by-case basis and we'll vote on rezoning those things. I don't think myself we're ready for that we need to consider some of these things. Again, I thought that the options above direct staff draft policy containing guidelines on siting of new cannabis retail stores is certainly a better first step. And I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Your Worship, on what it says here. B, direct staff to prepare a draft policy intended to streamline the processing of non-medical cannabis retail store applications by instituting the following. So the draft policy is to do two things. It's to say that the public hearing means that we've given it all the public review it needs, and that the staff can tell the government that it's not a policy that talks about the setbacks, talks about the security, talks about things that I think we're legitimately concerned about. So I'm not sure that the recommendations, to my mind, follow from the options as clearly as they would like. So I'm concerned with the recommendations, and I'm going to vote against them.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
May I ask staff if B2 requires a delegation bylaw? Perhaps the CAO.
Well, sorry, it looks like our Director of Long-Term.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reference to delegating to staff is within the provincial act that covers the legalization of cannabis. I would expect that delegation would be through bylaw. I'd have to check the act to determine that as a fact, but my expectation is that it would be most appropriate through bylaw.
In which case, I tend to agree with Councillor Parkinson that there's too much in this considering what we know at this point, but that directing staff to prepare a draft policy is a good start. So I would like to see this rejected and a new resolution that includes some of it to ask staff to work on a draft policy and perhaps one or two other things.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. So we do have a motion. I will read the motion one last time. The motion for consideration is that Council receive the staff report titled Review of Cannabis Bylaw Regulations dated April 15, 2019, and consider site-specific rezoning proposals for new cannabis retail stores on a case-by-case basis, and that staff prepare a draft policy intended to streamline the processes of non-medical cannabis retail store applications by instituting the following. A, designating a public hearing held in the course of a rezoning application process to fulfill the requirement of public consultation associated with a provincial non-medical cannabis retail sales license application, and B, delegating to staff the authority to make recommendations and comments on a provincial non-medical cannabis retail sales license applications for operations that have already been approved by council through a site-specific rezoning. That is the motion we're voting on. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Sorry, Dean, what are you doing? Dean, are you?
I'm voting for the motion.
Okay. So those opposed? So Councillor Parkinson, Councillor Baxter, Councillor Day opposed. The motion passes. So moving on then to 8.3. Planner rezoning application unit 107, 108, 2244 Souk Road, Hatley Plaza, site-specific text amendment to allow retail cannabis in land use bylaw. Who's speaking to the staff-wise? Okay. Council. So we did pass 8.2, so this can move forward. Does council have any questions to staff regarding this application? Councillor Kobayashi.
Just a quick question.
Oh, sorry, Mike.
Through the mayor, just a quick question. I was just looking at the site. Isn't that where the liquor store is right now? 107, 108?
Through your worship, it is where the present liquor store is, correct?
All right. Councillor Perkins?
So given the correspondence attached with this and the next one to say that there seems to be some confusion within that strata whether this is going to be acceptable or not. I'm wondering whether it's a little early to be moving anywhere with this. I mean, presumably the strata seems like they're going through some machinations. We have some letters of support from strata owners. We have the strata council saying, well, we had a vote that wasn't strong enough to say we don't want it. Presumably they got to get the strata in line as absolutely the first step before they're coming to us.
Do you have any comment to that?
Through the chair, the stratas do have the ability to regulate uses and create bylaws on their own property. However, municipalities are not required to adhere to their rules. So stratas must enforce their own bylaws. So the idea is that stratas can be more restrictive if they choose to do so.
I've got Councillor Jensen, then Baxter. Councillor Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I echo what Councillor Parkinson said. I'm reading the letter from the Strata. I'm confused by the letter in the first place, the way it's worded. I can't tell whether they're for or against it. Further, I have questions about, is this marijuana going to be co-located with the liquor then, or is the liquor store going the way of the dodo, or what?
I will look to staff.
Through the chair, I don't have clarity on whether it would be a combination store or not. I believe it would be determined through licensing.
Are you, just as a clarification to that answer, are you aware of any multi-use like cannabis plus liquor store? Like they're not combining the two, are they?
My understanding is that they're not combining the two.
Thank you. Councillor Jensen, do you have any follow-up?
No, those are my concerns. Thanks.
Councillor Baxter?
When you compare this with other rezonings that we consider, there is a monumental lack of information. I think that the letter that the applicant included tells us almost nothing. And I'm fine with proceeding to prepare the bylaw, but I think that it should be communicated to the applicant that there's absolutely no way that council is going to make a decision based on the information it has now, and that we need a heck of a lot more information before we make a decision. That's just my opinion. Staff's not going to communicate that just on my opinion, say so, but I hope everybody agrees with that.
Thank you. Councillor Day?
Thank you. I find myself in a very difficult position on this because I'm not unsupportive of cannabis stores in any way, shape, or form. But I do have difficulty with approving a change in my community without very much information about what that's going to look like. I don't have the information. I'm certain the public doesn't have the information on what that could potentially look like. So with a lack of information and the fact that the direction on the review of cannabis land use is already delegating to staff the authority, I just feel that I've been shuffled to the side and I can't support it when I don't know all the facts.
All right, I will need some sort of motion from this council.
In the absence of any other motion?
Sure.
I move that we request much more detailed information from the applicant before considering the preparation of a bylaw.
I need a seconder. Second. Thank you. I'm going to go to staff.
Through the chair, would it be possible to specify the exact information by resolution that you're looking for?
I don't know.
I can say that, given that I know almost nothing about the federal, I know nothing about the federal regulations and know very little about how this should be done because I've never seen a cannabis store before. I think probably the applicant should know better than we do, but I would say as a minimum, we need to know some information about how the co-location of the two on this site will be handled, because the liquor license is not going to go away. I think given that both licenses would effectively exist in the end on the one site means you can never be guaranteed they won't be co-located in the same store. And we've just heard somebody said that that they shouldn't be co-located. I've no idea whether there's any substantial proof that they shouldn't. We need to know more about security. We need to know more about one of the reasons liquor stores are tolerated is because there's no public consumption around the liquor store. But public consumption of marijuana or cannabis outside a cannabis store, I think, would greatly affect the willingness of the public to accept that in a location, and certainly affect my willingness. So I would like to know more about that. And I in the absence of that information from any other source, it has to come from the applicant.
Does that help you?
Through the chair, there's a second option identified under number 5, where it gives council the ability to defer a recommendation on the application until a Colwood cannabis policy is developed, and further information can be provided, and it goes through a number of things that municipalities do have the purview over. So that might help you with creating a list.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson, did you have a comment?
I did. It seems to me that one of the other requirements would need to be approval of the Strata Corporation to host it on that site. I mean, it's just like we wouldn't let somebody rezone a piece of property without the owner, saying it's okay. So I don't see how we would. I hear what you're saying, that our bylaws, we can say in our bylaws it's okay to put a cannabis store there, but the Strata could say, no, you can't, and then there's some kind of fight over who trumps who. But it seems to me that if you're putting it on a site, you should have a letter from the owner of the site saying it's okay. And then in a case of a Strata Corporation, I think it's the Strata that would have to say it's okay to put it here.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification. I mean, in the letter, it's very clear that they had a simple majority that had approved the cannabis store, but a simple majority wasn't good enough because in accordance with the Strata bylaws, it was 75%. But apparently, again, it says in the letter, if you read it, it clearly states that they were going to do attempt number 2. That's what it says, and that's where it leaves it. So you're right, Councillor Parkinson, it is moot if they should decide that they can't get their majority. So the letter says, please be advised the owners of this strata had a vote last night to change bylaws to exclude cannabis use and retail in the Hatley Centre. And whilst a majority of owners, 55.8%, they voted in favor of the new exclusion bylaw, it fell short of the 75%. So I think what it's saying is, no, you didn't. You said the opposite. So the majority voted in favor of excluding cannabis. So the majority don't want it excluded. So, but again, 50, 75%, whatever. They're a strata. They can figure it out. But it's up. They're still the guys who basically own the property, and they should say, yes, we support this application going forward, or we don't.
All right, thank you. Councillor Baxter, I'm starting to get grumpy, just so everybody knows. I'm starting to get hungry.
I think the whole discussion about what the strata thinks, what the strata's done or hasn't done, isn't essentially delegating the decision on this to the strata. I think that's totally inappropriate. Council should make its decision, and the strata should make its decision. And the council will enforce its decision.
Thank you, Councillor. She doesn't like it when I'm grumpy.
And it's up to the strata to enforce its decision. So I have no idea what the motivation of the owner is in getting going for this zoning, but he may simply be trying to put his foot on, if we're only going to allow them with certain separations, he wants to be the only one in the area. I don't know. But as I say, council makes its decision, strata makes its own decision. We don't make decisions on the basis of what stratas have decided.
So you're prepared to cram this down the throat of the owners who don't want it? I mean, that's crazy. No. Michael, the strata is the people who own that property, and they're joined in a strata. As we heard on the thing earlier, there's some of the things in there they may not like, but they're the property owners. They speak, and I don't see how you could go against those wishes as a council.
I think I'm just going to interrupt you two, because I believe if the city issues a permit, that doesn't supersede what the strata can do. So the strata can still exclude that use, even though the city has passed a bylaw that says that they can do it. So it's not that the city is not listening to what the strata wants. The strata can do whatever they want, and they will accomplish that. The city's just not making that determination based on what the strata wishes. The strata can put in any policy they wish. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just a question
Dean.
to the minute taker, if I may, on what motion is actually on the table here.
There's none. There isn't one.
I-
Did you make a motion
I
for
d-
8 point?
Yeah.
What is it?
That the request for the more detailed information from the applicant prior to the preparation of the bylaw, that wasn't voted on.
Who seconded that?
That was Michael and Cynthia.
Okay, thank you.
So
Okay, speaking to the motion. Councillor Day.
speaking to that motion then, because I wasn't noticing option 2, which the planner very nicely pointed out to us, which is to defer a recommendation on the application until a Colwood cannabis policy is developed and further information can be provided, including distance requirements from between retail outlets and schools and daycares, which is one of my concerns, hours of operation for retailers, type of permitted retail operations, public, private, both or neither, setting a maximum number of provincially approved retail outlets in Colwood, security measures beyond minimum security requirements under licensing, which was another concern that I had, advertising limits, and odor and noise mitigation. So I think that expands on what the motion that is on the table, and addresses the staff's need to have details on what information we're looking for, and would provide a lot more comfort in terms of council moving forward, as First Nations like to tell us, in a good way, because we do want to take everyone's opinion into account, including the businesses that are already there, the medical health officers, about the co-location with liquor stores, because that was something I hadn't picked up on before. I would just be much more comfortable. So if Councillor Baxter is comfortable with those being the issues, let's go with option 2 and get more information.
And I would be totally comfortable with adding council direct staff to consider policy options on the following, all of them, plus anything else council staff feels or the applicant feels is relevant.
So, so I'm just going to say this back. So that's in addition to your motion, or are you going to withdraw your motion and move number 2?
I'd be happy to move number 2 with very
Okay, so
slight change.
let's withdraw. You're going to withdraw. So the first motion is withdrawn. I will allow you to move motion 2, or excuse me,
Option 2.
option 2, and moved by Councillor Baxter, second by Councillor Day. I'm going to go to staff.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to ask Council if they could clarify the request for additional information is specific to this application. So the list of items that Council can consider in terms of applying policy or controls, I think would be appropriate for us to define whether that's in the context of this application or in the context of a larger policy objective that we discussed with the previous recommendation.
Okay, what was the object of your motion? Yes, go ahead.
So I would move option 2 with slight change. Remove, after further information can be provided, remove if council feels necessary to have additional information to consider this land use, and also remove the word may after council and pass it like that.
Okay, does that answer staff's question, though?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify that we're not talking about council asking for additional information on the development of global policies in these areas, but more the addressing of these issues as listed in the staff report as they relate to these specific applications.
No, I actually proposed removing the word that referenced the specific application.
Okay.
And then I think we probably need another motion to refer to the specific application, but, sorry, no, we've already deferred, yeah, okay. I think we're asking for general information and we're deferring the application until we get that general information.
So I guess the question that, I'm going to repeat it, what our director is looking for is he's trying to understand, or staff are attempting to understand, is this about this specific application or is this universal? Is this motion that's going to go forward? Because we also have 8 point, which one are we on right now?
Yeah.
3? We also have 8.4.
Yeah.
So, which is Unit 109. So is this going to affect 8.4 as well? And I think, am I speaking for Union? Is that correct? Is that what you're trying to get to?
Mr. Mayor, ostensibly, we had the discussion with the previous item with respect to global policy considerations. So at this point, council has directed staff to prepare draft policy dealing with the delegation and public hearing procedures. So this would, as I'm understanding it, add to that ask in terms of staff policy on these other areas. That would be different from asking an applicant, as in this case, to address these specific areas, and that's the clarity I'm looking for.
Yeah, my intention in this, what I've just proposed, is that it defers this application, but actually expands the ask in the previous resolution because it is intended to be general. So in other words, staff to provide the information, not necessarily the applicant, although he can if he wants to.
All right, I'm just going to look to staff to make sure that that's clean. Is that clean? Everybody gets it? Okay, great. Then, unless there's...
I just want to clarify.
Sure.
So my understanding is if this recommendation or this motion passes, that whenever we have a rezoning come forward in the future, we will be getting information about the distance between retail outlets and school operations. We will know what hours they're planning to work. We will know what other types of retail operations there are. We'll know how many outlets currently are in Colwood and are being proposed through the application. We'll know a little bit more about security measures beyond just what the province is requiring. And we'll know a bit more about advertising and odor and noise.
Just before I go to Councillor Baxter, staff, is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, I believe Councillor Day's, it would contradict what was previously stated by Councillor Baxter.
That's correct. What it would mean is that we would have a policy on all of these matters, and probably inevitably it would mean that staff would address all of those matters in any report on a future rezoning, and therefore, we would know whether the applicant had said anything, but that's not a direct outcome of this resolution.
Councillor Day, you feel comfortable with that answer?
Yes, I do. It's kind of potato.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Any other? Oh, Councillor Parkinson.
I think I'm being redundant here. Just clear. This is a global thing for this policy that will be developed before we deal with this application. Will be global for all of Colwood. Is that what everybody thinks? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Nobody does not, or passes unanimously. How then? Looking to staff, do we need the same motion for 8.4, or what do we do for 8.4, or do you want me just to proceed through it as? You just want me to proceed like just normal? All right.
Yes.
All right. We're proceeding through normal. Thank you. So 8.4, planner rezoning application, Unit 109, 2244. The council's direction is required on proposed amendments to land use bylaws. relating to the retail store cannabis. Second application. Yep, go ahead.
Move to defer.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 8.5, Senior Planner, Correspondent, CRD, Assessment of Local Government Interest in a Regional Food Land Access Program. The CRD Board is requesting indications of support for an operation of a food land trust in partnership with a nonprofit organization and adding Colwood lands to a CRD-operated food land trust. There is little to no suitable lands within Colwood. Council may wish to decline participation in the food land trust, but offer support in principle for other receptive regional municipalities to take part. Councillor Baxter.
I now understand why this lack of food has been arranged for this evening. It's to focus our attention on the importance of food. And I think food's very important, and I think that I love food, and I would love to support this, but I'm highly suspicious that the means of implementation here is going to spend a lot of money and achieve very little.
Councillor Jensen.
I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation.
Sorry, I was pushing the wrong one. Say that again, Dean?
I'll just move the staff recommendation, paragraph 8.
All right, thank you. So I got Councillor Jensen and Councillor Day has seconded it. And that is, any discussion, Councillor Day?
Thank you. I have, when I was the alternate at the CRD, this certainly was an issue that was brought up, and I just wanted to remind everybody that there is a letter on our table from Keely Nixon about how this would work, and just to say that even if there isn't farmland in Colwood that would come under this policy, and we may not financially contribute to it, it is beneficial to all of our residents that farmland exists within the Capital Regional District, and that we're able to have more local food produced, primarily through leasing farmland and making that available to farmers who are able to do so affordably.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
I just want to take issue with the fact that there's no farmland in Colwood. The company called Topsoil, I believe, has proven that you can farm on asphalt. And they actually, at the rail yards in Victoria, grow food for local restaurants, and they're a thriving business. And I'm sure if you can do it there, you could do it on a gravel pit or whatever.
Okay, thank you. I will just say that this did come before the CRD board. I voted against it at that board. I will vote again against it today. The CRD board was very split on this. This was very close. In the West Shore, there was not a director who did support it. Mayor Rands from Achosen spoke very eloquently about how this is not necessarily fair to present-day farmers who have had to acquire land, have had to work the economics of it, and by providing an economic advantage to some farmers, it actually could or create an instability in food security for present-day farmers, because they do not have the same subsidies that a land trust or a farm trust would. I think he came up with other suggestions saying that they were subsidizing labor costs for present-day farmers. That would create a amount of security much stronger than actually creating a food land trust through the CRD. And saying all that, so I will not be supporting this motion this evening. Any other? Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also, instead of just looking at the materials that were provided in this package, because they were very one-sided, I did something similar, Mr. Mayor. I called Mayor Rands, talked to him. I talked to Mayor Orr out in North Sandwich. Totally different perspective. Holy mackerel, what a wake-up call it was. And then they referred me to a consultant who actually, he's the guy that supplies 42,000 pounds to our place downtown. And he was dead set against this too, because he did say that it was going to set up potentially a two-tier system. And he called it tantamount to being communistic, whatever. So, you know, in principle, everyone agrees with it, but, you know, the idea is good, but maybe not all the options for a solution are right. One of them actually had this idea of, it was being supported was a food voucher program. So there's different options, and they've already concluded this is the way we're going to go. I think that at the very least, taxpayers' money being to subsidize this land is just not an acceptable option, and I will be voting against it. If they could show me a solution that is revenue neutral, okay, let's everything's on the table. But I am not a farmer. That's not my expertise, and so that's why I did take the opportunity to call those mayors. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before I call the question? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? So count. Dean, yeah, which way are you? Well, Dean moved the motion, so he has to vote in favor, doesn't he? No. Oh, does
I'm opposed.
You're opposed. Okay, so count. Everybody opposed except Councillor Day. I'm going to say it that way. Just after the vote, staff.
Your Worship, just to clarify then, is it Council's position that staff provide the form to the CRD board indicating that Colwood will not participate?
Correct. Well, that is my understanding, unless Council has another direction. Okay, thank you. 8.6, Director of Finance, UBCM Asset Management Grant Application regarding the drainage flow monitoring. A UBCM grant has been developed for an asset management grant program that can cover up to 50%, up to a maximum of $15,000 to an asset management related project. Staff feel the drainage flow monitoring project with a total budget of $50,000 meets the eligibility requirements and would like to apply.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, second by Councillor Day. Councillor Parkinson?
Yeah, I got a few thoughts. Sorry.
Are you just dragging this time out?
I am.
I think you are.
Enjoying every minute of it. So firstly, if you want to move the recommendation, it's got to be changed, because number 2 says, be it further resolved, the City of Colwood commits $50,000 from its budget towards the cost of this initiative. My English would say that with those prepositions, you'd go back to what are you talking about, and it would be number 1, be it resolved that council directs staff to apply for grants. So the motion as it reads now says you're going to spend $50,000 to apply for the grant for $15,000. So that's not what you meant. So you got to reword that. But here's my real concern. We're looking at doing a drainage monitoring project, probably a very worthwhile and useful thing to do. It's going to cost $50,000. We're going to sit and twiddle our thumbs for 6 months or longer waiting for a grant before we start. And you sort of see why everything takes so long. You know, if it needs to be done, if it should be done, maybe we should get on with it instead of sort of going, great idea, let's ask somebody else for money and sit and wait for who knows how long. This applying for grants, if we're going to do it, we have to be looking further down the road. We can't wait till something comes and should be done and then say, okay, let's look for a grant and wait 6 months, or in the case of Latoria Creek Stairs, a year or a year and a half, whatever it's going to be. We're just not getting anything done. We're stalling. We're procrastinating. So I have concerns about this. I'd say, let's go. Let's just get her done. If it needs to be done, let's do it.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Day, then Baxter.
Sorry, I just would like to hear back from staff, because for whatever reason I can't find this in my package here tonight, but it did sound reasonable to me that if there's a grant opportunity, we should try and get a grant. I do understand what Councillor Parkinson's saying in terms of, the $50,000 ask from our budget. So certainly drainage projects need to be done. whether they're moved up because we have a grant, I'm all right with that. But I would like to hear from staff in terms of how this motion would impact our finances.
Thank you, Your Worship. The drainage flow monitoring project has already been approved in the budget, so it's going to proceed with or without this grant, and it'll proceed at the most operationally expedient time. So this would just offset what would be internal financing for it to the tune of $15,000.
And just before I get to Councillor Baxter, can I clarify, is Councillor Parkinson correct that we cannot proceed with actually doing the work until after the grant application is closed?
Through Your Worship, no, that's not correct. It's funded already in the budget. We're just going to proceed according to our operational plan. If we get $15,000 because we've applied, great. If not, we've got funding for it. So this is not a grant contingent project. I understand Councillor Parkinson's what he's saying. There are some grant contingent projects in the budget. This is not one of them.
I stand corrected then.
Councillor Baxter?
Then I actually have a supplemental question to yours. If we proceed...
Oh, Mike.
Sorry. If we proceed and the grant still has not been awarded, does that mean we cannot then get the grant? Is this one of those grants that you have to wait till you get it if you want it?
To Your Worship, thank you. That's a good question, Councillor Baxter. The UBCM Asset Management Planning Grant is actually significantly more flexible than the other grants. So the window for when the work must occur is quite wide.
Thank you, UBCM.
Councillor Kobayashi?
Yes, I'd like to make the motion to adopt the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Is it already?
Oh, is it?
Already been moved?
Sorry.
Okay. It's already been moved in a second, so you're going to say call the question.
Call the question.
Excellent. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 8.8, Manager of Building Inspection and Bylaw Services Early Adoption Initiative for Tall Wood Mass Timber Construction. An expression of interest has been received from the Office of Housing and Construction Standards regarding an early adoption initiative for tall wood mass timber structures. Does Council have any questions for staff? Councillor Day.
Thank you. I have some concerns about this because it is an early adoption of an untested building regulation change, and I wondered if staff had any comments that could help me address that.
You're the only one.
Through the chair to Councillor Day. Good question. Actually, this is a proven technology already in terms of there are not many of these buildings available at the moment, but the Standards Branch in British Columbia and the National Building Code have researched it very heavily and are of the opinion, based on proven fact, that it is a viable option, and that for BC, what this means is value-added timber being used in construction instead of low logs going offshore. So I think there's a positive from that side. The other thing is there have been 6 applications already in Langford, and we have possibly 1 application here in Colwood.
I will let Councillor Day do a follow-up, and Baxter, then Parkinson.
Sorry, just to finish off, because this is for the affordable housing in Colwood, I won't be supporting it because I'm not aware of the testing for the longevity of the building, and that's one of the really big issues with affordable housing is the longevity of the building.
May I answer that question? Sorry, through the chair. Some good points there, but the issue here is that we're going to be one of the testers of this technology. However, the building code in 2020, that's next year, actually will change to permit 12-story buildings. So all we're doing is getting a jump start on it.
The signature of the fire chief and the manager of building inspections and bylaw gives me every confidence in this, as well as what I've read about it. I believe it's been tested in Finland. I think that's right. But I think perhaps we shouldn't describe this as that we're testing it so much as we're showcasing it. We're showcasing something that's already been tested.
Good PR. Councillor Parkinson.
Sorry, but to me, it looks like we're being asked to be on the bleeding edge of something new and innovative, and it doesn't, just because it has worked in places and it's going to come in the building code. Why do we want to be early adopters in the first few in something like this that we're probably not equipped? You go to Vancouver or Surrey, where they have much larger staff and more resources to sort of address the issues that come up when you're doing the one-off of anything. I don't see the need to rush into this myself. I'm not convinced that there's a value to the City of Colwood to get in early on this.
Thank you. It's Councillor Logan, then Baxter.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Baxter actually brings up some good points in terms of the buy-in from the fire chief and building inspection folks. I look at it as an opportunity to expand our partnership with the province, and we know the province is really interested in working with the city and showcasing a project like this based on some conversations I've had with MLA. So I think this project could be the stepping stone for other projects and would foster some really goodwill with the province in terms of wanting to be an innovator and to foster some growth and some opportunity in the affordable housing sector, if it means we get some more affordable housing units on a site that may not have been able to be built, but are because of this, then I think we should be looking at that. But moreover, I think it's a great way to partner with the province.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter.
I think Councillor Parkinson way overstates his case by calling this bleeding edge. But I think it's part of economic development to show that we are innovators and not scared of modern technology.
All right. Without any other comments, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And can we find out what Dean did? Not that it matters.
Are you opposed or carried?
I got 4 anyway, so it's good. So Councillor Parkinson and Day have
Moved it?
no. Who moved
Opposed it.
Yeah, no, somebody moved it. Did some? Oh, I'm sorry. Then we're going to need to go back to the original
I'll move
motion.
it. I'll move it, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. So Councillor Logan, Councillor Kobayashi moved it. I'll call the vote one more time just so that it's official. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Day, Councillor Parkinson, and I don't know. How do you vote?
I'm for the motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so that brings us to 9, bylaws. Before we begin, may I ask Council if anybody's offended if I do this? What I'd like to do moving forward with the bylaws is to ask for a mover and a seconder, and then just keep that mover and seconder for like the second reading, third reading, so that we just get through it rather than me sitting here and waiting seconders. Who's going to second it? They do that at CRD, and it seems to just speed things up. So unless there's anybody offended by that, I'd like to just try that out and see how it goes. 9.1, bylaw number 1711, first, second, and third reading. This is Colwood Main Service Area. Authorization bylaw number 598, 2001, amendment number 64. Do I have a mover?
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Logan. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, I have the same mover and seconder. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Third reading, same mover and seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9.2, bylaw number 1712, first, second, third reading, Colwood West Sewer Local Area Service Establishment and Loan Authorization bylaw number 625, 2001, amendment number 48, bylaw number 1712, 2019. May I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Kobayashi, seconded by
Second.
Councillor Baxter. All those in favor? Opposed? I have the same mover for the second reading. Any discussion? Councillor Day?
Just when we're doing these bylaws, I know it's old hat for us, but when we have public watching via the live stream or the recording, it's good if we could note the location. So this is for 3403 Karger Terrace.
Thank you. Any other? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Third reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw number 1753, third reading only, road closure and dedication removal bylaw of a portion of highway between 23441 and 2344B, Souk Road, bylaw number 1753, 2019.
Dennis has a
Worship.
Oh, discussion before I have a mover. Yep.
If I may, just for council's information, this bylaw was posted in the Gazette on 2 consecutive days, advising of the dedication and closure, and we did not receive any response from the public. So it's before you for third reading tonight. I should also mention that the adoption of this bylaw will be considered at the same time as the adoption of the rezoning bylaw.
Okay. Thank you.
move third.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had a question.
Sure. No, sorry. Do I have a seconder on that? I just go with
Second.
seconder and then I'll go to questions.
Second.
So moved by Logan, seconded by Baxter. Question, Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just in the original report, there was, if memory serves correctly, a $5,000 retainer for the developer to pay for the cost of doing this. I just wanted to be sure that that was received and covered everything that was necessary.
Your Worship, if this receives third reading tonight before the finalization of the purchase and sales agreement, we will require the $5,000 deposit from the applicant.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw number 1761, tax rate bylaw, final reading.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Day, seconded by Baxter. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
This is like
9.5, bylaw number 1762, Colwood Sewer Utility, amendment number 7, final reading.
move final.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Bylaw number 1759, third and final reading, Colwood Land Use Bylaw number 151, 1989, amendment number 176, CDs 13, Zone Latorium Bazante.
Xanten.
Thank you. Bylaw number 1759, 2019.
Move third.
Your Worship,
Yes.
if I could just, and just for the benefit of Councillor Jansen, on this one, and I didn't mention it in at the public hearing portion of the meeting, but we did receive 2 items from the public regarding this. One, which I believe most councillors have before them, but for the benefit of Councillor Jansen, the one was expressing some concerns about the implications and the impact on Creekview Lane, which you heard earlier tonight. And the other one was, and I think there was perhaps some confusion on their part, but they were worried about the intensity of the development that was being proposed under the proposed bylaw.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
I'd like to propose something after this bylaw is passed.
Okay. Not yet. I need a mover and seconder, and then I can go. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Logan, seconded by
Second.
Baxter. Questions? Councillor Parkinson?
I just wanted to make sure I was clear. We have this letter from the Quinns. So area 1 and 3, I believe, are already fully developed. There's no further development anticipated on those. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think that's where the confusion comes in this.
Yeah. And areas 2 and 5 are riparian, and there'll be no development on those?
Right. It's this bylaw applies mainly to area 4.
And are they going to build 7-story buildings there?
No.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Sorry, but is there another route for commercial traffic rather than coming up through Creekview?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to deal with that afterwards because I think we just need to ask staff to do something.
Fair enough.
We don't need a resolution.
All right, we're in third reading. And Councillor Jensen's gone to bed. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Final. I'm going to go with the same mover and seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Baxter?
The concern about Creekview Lane can be alleviated if the traffic uses Bezanton instead. Creekview Lane is a private road, but the city has a stat right-of-way over it. Stat right-of-ways are usually in favor of the city and its invitees, and I would just ask that staff, upon the request of the people who own Creekview Lane, be prepared to put up signs essentially disinviting heavy traffic. So in other words, make it a non-truck route temporarily while the construction goes on, and I would just like to know if staff would proceed with that without a resolution.
Yep. Yes. I'm getting a head shake.
Okay.
Moving on to
9.7.
9.7. Bylaw number 1763, first, second, and third reading. Colwood Main Sewer Local Area Service Establishment and Loan Authorization. Bylaw number 598, 2001, Amendment number 74, LSA Enlargement, 668 Carindale Road. Bylaw number 1763, 2019. Need a mover and seconder for first reading. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Kobayashi.
Second.
Second by Baxter. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading. I have the same mover and seconder. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those. Oh, sorry. Yes, Councillor.
Do we charge fees for this that come anywhere close to the cost and nonsense of producing all this paper and bylaws and stuff? I mean,
Looking at me. Okay, we are supposed to be doing cost recovery. I will look to our Director of Finance.
Cost recovery for the paper to produce the bylaws? Is that the question?
well, I mean, this is a process that takes our time. It takes your time. It takes a little bit of, I mean, somebody's making these maps. Is there a fee associated that comes anywhere close to covering the cost of this nonsense?
Through the chair. The process is the result of legal resolution. So it is onerous, but there's a purpose for it. No, there's no cost recovery for this for preparing the bylaws. But by placing someone in the West Sewer Local Area Service, they are now part and responsible for paying the fee related to that local area service.
Okay, Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just wondering if you know, and if you don't know right tonight, you could let us know at another time, but what the fees are that are associated with joining the local area for sewers, because I have had reported to me that they are quite high by residents when they have signed up.
Through your worship, happy to provide that information. I believe that what the residents are probably referring to, and please correct me wrong, is really the cost of actually connecting to the main that's established in that local area service. And I will provide council with that information.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm going to call the question. This is second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have the same people for the third reading, same councillors. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. We are now 9.8, bylaw number 1764, first, second, third reading, Colwood West Sewer Local Area.
Move introduction.
It is for 668 Carindale Road. I'm just trying to provide that. Thank you. So I got a mover and seconder for first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second reading, I got same mover and seconder. Any discussion?
I think Marcy needs to.
Sorry, do you need the mover and seconder again?
I thought it was Councillor Parkinson.
It's Logan and Parkinson.
Yeah. Got it.
Second reading, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Third reading, same mover and seconder. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? We're done.